It was easy to predict that war communism became a complete failure. The industrial output of Russia in 1921 reached a mere 20% of pre-war levels. Millions starved to death. People lacked adequate food supplies. They burned their floors not to freeze to death in harsh Russian winters. Support for the Bolsheviks evaporated quickly. Even the sailors of Kronstadt, who were very avid Bolshevik supporters, revolted against the regime in February 1921. In 1921, the new economic policy, the Novaya Ekonomicheskaya Politika, or NEP, was introduced to save the Bolshevik Revolution. The NEP first replaced brutal confiscations by moderate taxation. It reintroduced market incentives and private initiatives. Small-scale private industry was legalized and extreme nationalization was cancelled. Centrally directed gigantic companies were replaced by market-oriented independent firms. In April 1923, even state-owned companies were allowed to operate on profit basis in the market. Free supplies and free services were abolished. The NEP was a success. Industrial output increased, industrial production surpassed pre-war levels in 1926. The pressing question remained, however, where the revolution was headed. Lenin's serious illness triggered succession wars among the leaders of the Communist Party. Trotsky, Kamenev, and Bukharin were sparkling, highly intelligent and educated men. Stalin was uneducated and quite a primitive speaker. However, his organizational skills were very good. Interestingly, forced industrialization was not developed by Stalin. It was a program developed by Trotsky and his fraction of the party. First, Stalin condemned the Trotsky's program of forced industrialization. But after Stalin seized power in 1927, he introduced forced industrialization as his own invention. Stalin's first five-year plan between 1928 and 1932 planned overambitious growth in Soviet Union. Agricultural output and industrial output would be doubled within just 5 years' time. The new goals were to triple agriculture and industrial output during the first five-year plan. In some branches of the industry, growth was even more accelerated. The electrical industry had to grow sixfold within 5 years' time. Stalinism has been heavily criticized by historians, mostly because of its social, economic, and environmental costs. According to Ivan Berend, ruthless dictatorship was required to subordinate and exploit agriculture, the economy, and the entire population, to enforce the tremendous human suffering and sacrifice necessary to achieve Stalin's monomaniac industrialization goals in an extremely short period of time. Plan indicators became compulsory targets. The fulfillment of the plan was sanctioned by laws and regulations. The failure to fulfill the plan was interpreted as sabotage and crime. Market and profit motives were totally eliminated. The market was replaced by a system of central distribution. In 1929, a strict rationing system was introduced. According to Alec Nove, the events of 1929 and 1934 constitute one of the greatest dramas of world history. Stalin's revolution was one of the bloodiest and most insane in history. The state mobilized millions. Millions of people were killed and imprisoned. Much of the achievements were done by forced labor. The brutal collectivization of agriculture began under the first five-year plan. Compulsory delivery was introduced. Dekulakization programs began. In the summer of 1930, 300,000 Kulak families were deported. Next year, the number of deported families rose to 1 million. Years of the first five-year plan under Stalin were probably one of the darkest chapters of Soviet history. Upon joining the collective farm, peasants were required to give up their animals and land to the collective. Collective farms followed a uniform pattern. Machinery was owned by the cooperative. Members received pay according to work units fulfilled. Stalin has enforced the production of as many strategic materials and products as possible. Stalin's industrialization drive was based on the technological structural requirements of the early 20th century and sought to increase the production of coal, iron, steel, oil, tractors, and some traditional engineering products. In fact, Soviet economy during the first five-year plan facilitated rapid growth. This did not mean, however, that the Soviet economy created the appropriate technological and structural basis for the 1930s and beyond. The Stalin's model of modernization was not a model of modern adjustment to the world economy. However, as a result, the Soviet Union did not search for a response to the challenges of changes in the old technological regime and consequent structural crisis. It seemed to be a successful model of industrialization in the 1930s. Fascism evolved simultaneously with nationalism and communism. In a way, it was a deformation of both nationalism and communism. It evolved into a third robust ideology of the first part of the 20th century. Fascism advocated extreme national fundamentalism. It subordinated citizens and their individual rights to the interest of the nation. It was hostile to other nations, and it rejected the Western-dominated world order and values. Fascism advocated to create a strong authoritarian state that was anti-liberal and anti-parliamentary. It developed a cult of charismatic leadership. It rejected class differences in the national community. It aimed to create a homogeneous collectivist society. This society would realize National Socialism and would struggle against the West and international finance. This society would also eliminate society's alien elements, for example the minorities. Der geschlossene Handelsstaat, published in 1800 by Johann Gottlieb Fichte, and Das nationale System der politischen Ökonomie, published in 1841 by Friedrich List, and other leading German philosophers' works in the 19th century supplied the roots of Nazi ideology. Nazi ideologists also aimed to stretch their roots as far as they could. Several of them claimed in the 1930s that the Third Reich was embodiment of Hegel's ideas about the state. Fascism and Nazism entailed right-wing revolutions in nations where national emancipation was troubled and delayed. In Central and Eastern Europe, class struggle was transformed into anti-Semitic struggles and anti-bourgeois aggressiveness. This was combined with the promise that social modernization and rapid industrialization can be achieved via anti-liberal economic nationalism and protectionism. After World War I, French policy sought to weaken Germany and replace the centralized German Empire by a confederation of German states. These goals were compromised because of Britain and the United States. The French, however, managed to dissolve the Austrian Empire. Georges Clemenceau, the French Prime Minister, envisioned an alliance to construct around Germany. As a consequence, the Sudetenland and its homogeneous German population was given to Czechoslovakia. Polish claims to Upper Silesia and its rich coal fields were supported. Transylvania was given to Romania, Vojvodina to Yugoslavia. The new borders created extreme ethnic and religious diversity in new nation-states. In Czechoslovakia, Poland and Romania, about one-third of the population belonged to ethnic groups. In Yugoslavia, one-fourth of the population was Albanian. National minorities lived either close to their motherlands in these new states or well within the boundaries of new countries. Because of the mixture of population, ethnic separation was impossible in these new states. The minority problem continued to be one of the most pressing issues in Central and Eastern Europe throughout the 20th century. As a result, oppression and injustice continued, but with reversed hierarchy. Members of former dominating nations became minorities. New dominating nations sought retribution for past grievances. New countries were also very diverse religiously. For example, Poland was predominantly Catholic, with large Greek Orthodox and Jewish minorities. Future conflicts were encoded in the new interwar order. Czechoslovakization was rejected by Slovak nationalists. For example, in 1928, Wojtek Tuka called for the reconsideration of the Slovak National Council's decision to join Czechoslovakia. Tuka called for Slovak national independence. He was accused of conspiring and was sentenced to 15 years of imprisonment. The Serb and Croat conflict worsened in Yugoslavia. The Croatian political elite supported the united Yugoslav of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, but quickly turned to anti-Serbian nationalism. Nikola Pasic, the Prime Minister of Yugoslavia, was nearly killed in an assassination attempt. Confrontation and violence continued. On June 1920, 1928, Stjepan Radic and 3 other Croatian members of the parliament were shot dead by Puniša Račić, a Montenegrin Serb nationalist. Nationalism and violence triggered conflicts in Yugoslavia. Although less violent, nationalism dominated the political life of the new countries in Central and Eastern Europe. In Poland, Roman Dmowski's ultranationalist and anti-Semitic National Democratic Party became increasingly popular. As early as 1926, Dmowski advocated for dictatorship that should be organized along the Führerprinzip. Polish political life was filled with tensions. These erupted in a coup d'etat by Marshal Józef Pilsudski in May 1926. The armed conflict led to a civil war. Pilsudski eventually gained control of the country and organized a modernization dictatorship. Extremist trends were very successful in Austria. Hitler's Nazi Party had a strong branch in Austria. Rudolf Jung published in 1990 the Nationalsozialismus. Jung argued that major industries should be nationalized. Walter Riehl suggested that Vienna's housing problems could be easily solved by the expulsion of 200,000 Jews.